The last reason is probably one of the most common reasons, actually, that will hinder us from a closer walk with God. And that is the lack of intimacy with the Father through prayer and studying His Word. 1 Chronicles 16:11 says, "Look to the Lord and His strength. Seek His face always." We can be sure to pursue healthy relationships and be forgiving of one another, but we're not going to operate as effectively in those areas if we aren't taking care of our own spiritual lives in our own times alone. A lot of what God pours into our lives as Christians is a result of how intentional we are in seeking God in our own time. When we fill up on God's presence, worshiping Him through prayer and diving into His Word, we then get to go out and pour into the lives of other people. But if we aren't as intentional in our alone time with God, we won't be as effective in these other things. This is when we can become stagnant and comfortable for prolonged periods of time. As I've mentioned before, I often have these times where I'm feeling stuck, but typically it's usually before I experience a breakthrough to the next level of God's purpose for me. But when we remain stuck in these seasons for prolonged periods of time, it's when we need to be careful that we don't fall away and render ourselves ineffective for God's work in our lives. My all-time favorite way to enter God's presence is with a heart of gratitude and thanking Him for all He is doing in my life. 1 Thessalonians 5:18 says, "Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus." Thankfulness is like the Midas touch for whatever situation I'm in. Gratitude brings healing, joy, and true peace regardless of whatever you may be experiencing in the moment. It's a sure way to spark change and increased intimacy in your relationship with God.